everybody could just take a second and put their name and the organization that they're from in the chat. And anything else that you want us to know about you today, just say what you're most looking forward to getting out of this session together. We have a lot of information to share with you. We're really excited because we're going to be sending you home with a lot of really useful information that you can take back to your organizations and begin to use. So stay tuned. You will get a recording of this session. You will also get this slideshow. And we also have, I believe, 4 resources that we're also going to be sending out to you that will complement the presentation. So as always, if you have any questions afterwards, we are happy to email you or hop on the call for a little bit and answer those questions directly with you. So once again, welcome to Empowered Nonprofits, Evolution of Strategic Planning. My name is Stefanie Pessis Weil. I am the Chief Empowerment Officer of Empowered Nonprofits. We are about a 3-year-old firm at this point, although I've been consulting for about 15 years. And Christina is going to be joining me. Do you mind going to the next slide, Rochelle? Christina, my colleague, is going to be joining me as well on this. She is a wealth of information. I think you're going to learn a lot from her. The reason why we are doing this particular webinar is that we are noticing that a lot of organizations are really in a transition process as it relates to how far ahead can they plan, and does it make sense to plan 3 to 4 years down the line? What could this process look like to be streamlined a little bit more? Brenda, if you don't mind muting, that would be amazing. And so we are really, we think that this is going to be a really important conversation for you to have, because strategic visioning, strategic planning is very important for organizations. But we also want to make sure that we're respecting people's hours and the amount of time that and resources we have to dedicate to this process. So we're excited to show you what we would like to see this process become in the near future. So Empowered Nonprofits, we consult with nonprofits, small to medium size organizations. We do strategic fundraising, planning. We work with boards. We do trainings. We help organizations understand what is the role of the leadership and how does that process work. We do event planning, anything that comes up under annual campaign. And also strategic visioning and planning. So we're going to hop in right now. If you have any questions about what we do, we can certainly answer that after this meeting. But for now, we're going to jump right in. Rochelle, do you mind going to the next slide?
I will do it. And so, though I didn't say my background, while we're on this, what we'll cover, I'll say my background a little bit. I've worked with Stefanie now, I think maybe a little bit over 2 years. And before that, I've been a fundraiser essentially for 15 years as kind of the lead development advancement person, and a variety of organizations, from kind of smaller, mid-sized arts nonprofits, K-12 education nonprofits, to large universities. And my kind of wheelhouse is helping through this kind of centered lens of fundraising, helping organizations go from like one version of themselves to another. As a fundraiser, I've always had a seat at the table and been a very central part of that process. And this is the tool that I have used at almost every single organization that I've gone to. And it's the first thing I ask that we try, so that we can get the organization aligned, and have a plan moving forward that's aspirational, and I can immediately go to work on trying to get that funded. And so what we'll cover today is what is a strategic vision roadmap? Like, what is that tool? That's my go-to tool, and Stefanie's as well. Why and when to choose this option. So when might it work for you, and when might you need something else? The 4 stages of the process. So at some point it's going to step out of what a strategic vision roadmap is, and there's some parts that will go after it. And then also some tools that we find very useful to kind of have in our wheelhouse when we're doing this process, and then at the end of it.
Great.
And so we thought when I do it has a little lag, so that's why the pause is the slide moving. So we wanted to start with just a few definitions, because there's always murkiness when you talk about mission, vision, strategic planning. And so we wanted to be clear what we were meaning when we were saying, so we can all have a conversation on the same page. And we hope that this is a conversation. If you have something to say, feel free and put it in the chat, and we can address it in real time, raise your hand, whatever it may be. We do hope that you don't walk away with questions unasked. You can contact us afterwards though. So we'll start with what a strategic vision is, and that we're thinking of that as something that is different than a vision statement. And the difference would be that this is also a concise and very aspirational statement that paints a picture of your future. But instead of this being a very kind of like pie in the sky, if everything was ideal at some point, love each other and kumbaya, this would be an achievable future. And it could be anywhere from 3 to 10-year future. If you were to achieve your goals, this is what would happen. This is something that the organization would look like, and the kind of impact it was making. And so a business plan is typically a key part of a strategic plan. And this is separating the two. And so the business plan would be that next step down of, once you've identified that grand aspirational goal and how you're going to get there, that would be like the money, the staffing, how your organization is going to operate, what that looks like. And so when we think of a strategic plan, we're typically combining those two, your strategic vision and your business plan. It usually covers a 3 to 5 year period, and it focuses on outlining like strategies, measurable goals from the onset before you get started.
Great. So this is what we believe makes up a strategic vision roadmap. We believe that what Christina just defined, the strategic vision, plus we're going to go over these 2 pieces of things, the aspirational goals and our tactics, will make up your strategic vision roadmap. So it is the more condensed version of a strategic plan. It is taking the pieces that we believe are the most important things to move you forward in a more streamlined fashion. Next slide, please. Okay, so here is the benefits of this strategic vision roadmap process. First of all, we want to make sure that everything that you're doing is mission driven. All of your planning, all of the activities that you are doing as an organization adhere to your mission or are based in your mission. So you definitely want to take a look at your mission and ensure that this process is really jiving with that. We also believe that this process is faster and taking into consideration, I think all of you who have been a nonprofit for many years, we know that our lay leadership has much less time to dedicate to our organizations as they used to. It doesn't mean that they don't still want to do the same type of high quality job, but they just don't, there's just less hours in the day. So this process is definitely a faster process, but we also believe that it's more adaptive in today's climate, especially just coming out of COVID. We know that a 5-year strategic plan would have been completely obsolete in the era of COVID. So we want to make sure that that any plan that we're putting together can be fluid, can adapt more readily, and we believe that this process will allow you to do that. It gives you a chance to look at your organization from a 30,000-foot view and determine why those goals that you are establishing for yourself have value to the organization. So we really want this process to be a higher level. Once the strategic vision roadmap goes to the committee level, it will become much more granular and much more focused on the tasks at hand. But through this process, we want to stay very high level. Are we achieving our organizational goals? And are the goals that we have established, do they still have merit for our organization? We all want to make sure that we are aligned about the goals that we want to achieve together. And we're going to get into this a little bit later, the conversations that we need to have and the value that we need to have in some of the debates. Just FYI, this can be an emotional process for an organization. It could sometimes bring up things that are brewing, or it might make people feel a little bit defensive. That's normal, but it's all about making sure that you are having those conversations so that you can make sure that the goals that you are establishing are achievable together. It also, you want to make sure that this decision-making process for your organization gets established through your strategic vision roadmap. So once you lay it out, how are those then decisions going to get made, the day-to-day decisions? How is that process going to happen? It provides accountability for your staff and your lay leadership. So down the line, you can say, hey, we established that we were going to achieve this in year 1. Have we done that? You can go back to this strategic vision roadmap and ensure that's happening. An organization that I'm working with right now, that's going to be a monthly process. So at every single meeting, there will be tasks that will be assigned in between each board meeting. And then we will ensure that there's accountability on a monthly basis. That is the accountability structure that this organization is setting up. For your organization, it might be different. And it's also really an opportunity to get to know your board and your staff and your stakeholders on a deeper level. What does your board want? What does your staff need? What kind of organization are your stakeholders looking for to support? So you'll be able to really start to dig in deep for some of these questions. Next slide, please. Okay. So a strategic roadmap here, the do's and the don'ts. We want you to think big during this process. This is your opportunity to think outside of the box. Is there a project that we have not done before that we think that we want to do in this next phase of our plan? Spitball everything at the wall, especially in the beginning. You'll have an opportunity to work that through, but think big. What do you want to achieve?
I'm going to chime in right here.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm just because I don't think we can stress that enough. That's also why it's in caps with an exclamation point, is that I feel the thing that we have to do the most is keep pushing organizations to think even bigger and more aspirational, because this strategic vision needs to be compelling to everyone outside of your organization who doesn't know how the sausage is made. And so you want to make sure that it can carry you through some years, and that it's not we're going to fundraise more, we're going to make incremental change in how many people we serve. It needs to be much more grandiose. may seem unachievable at the moment because you know everything that's going on in your organization, but through this process, it very much will be.
Absolutely. So that's where the spitballing comes in, just throw things at the wall in the beginning. Nothing is off limits and there is no judgment by everybody that's involved. Let's think of that big audacious goal, as some of you might have heard us, have heard that term used before. Do be very mission focused and centered. Evaluate your mission, make sure it's still your right mission. If it is your right mission, everything that you're doing really needs to come back to that mission. What are the unique strengths that you have as an organization? The people that are sitting on your board, what strengths do they bring to the table? What tools do you have that you can leverage in order to make this process successful? Do you have somebody in your wheelhouse that that can facilitate this process? So really evaluate before you're getting into this, evaluate who's on your team, and we'll get into that in a little bit more. In a little more time. Seek out new perspectives. If there are people not sitting around the table, or you don't have those experts or those perspectives in the room, make sure that you have them. You want those unique perspectives at the table to challenge you, to push back. This should be a point in your time as a nonprofit board member or staff member where you are challenging everything that you're doing and really looking at from all different angles. Make sure those people who can challenge that are at your table. And be transparent and vulnerable. Like, be honest with each other, have the hard conversations. I was at a meeting the other night where it got a little bit emotional, and that was okay. I let everybody know that was fine. Because we all come with our own lens and our own perspectives and our own viewpoints, and the vulnerability really does allow for, it's like, when you're working out, right? You only get bigger muscles by having the resistance, right? And by by challenging your body. It's the same thing here. Like, challenge your organization, challenge yourselves. You will grow from that. Do not assume.
In a better metaphor, because technically you're tearing your muscles while you're working out. Anyway, that's and then they heal.
Right, exactly. Don't assume anything. That is the worst thing you can do. We always, someone will send an email, someone will send a text. Think about how you read tone in that, right? Don't ever assume that the message that is being given to you is actually what that person is saying. Try and get clarification. Analysis.
Know what your audience needs. So
Exactly.
That's about seeking out new perspectives that you might have. Your organization might already have a plan in place, and then through this process realize, oh, we're real off.
Yeah, exactly. Analysis paralysis. We are all guilty of this, well, I know I am. I shouldn't speak for everybody, but the more we analyze, the more we, dig in, are we paralyzing ourselves from really being able to work to create something much larger beyond what we possibly imagine together? This is my favorite thing that happens in a standard strategic planning process that this really can eliminate, is this putting the cart before the horse. Sometimes when I'm in these meetings, people already start getting into the problem solving mode. They get into the weeds, they get too much into the details, the tactics. This is how we're going to solve this. This is not the time really for that. This is for that 30,000 foot view. So make sure that you're not trying to necessarily solve the issues right now. That comes later at the committee level. Right now, we're trying to really figure out what our big goals are that we want to accomplish in the next few years together. And that stuck in perfectionism, this process doesn't have to be perfect. Your documents do not have to be perfect. If you find things that are wrong with them along the way, they should be able to be revised. They should be fluid. It should be a process that you can revisit over and over again as an organization throughout the next year or two. If your timing was off, if the goal was a little bit off, you can revise those and make those changes together as a board and as an organization.
And that's really, I feel like, the beauty of this process is that, one, because it is a draft, it allows a lot of people to feel like they're providing input, even if you're 2 years into it, feel like they're providing a lot of input into your plan and strategy and future, and get really bought into it because of the input that they provided, because it's always a draft, it's always revising, you can always incorporate a good idea, and so it's important to keep it in that way and have this kind of like open, adaptive mindset. And so this is the first phase, and the first phase is you prepare. So before anything happens, this is kind of what do you need to know, and this is really about starting with your big question. And I'm assuming right now, because I feel like it, that what brought you here was some sort of question of, we want to get from point A to point B. We want to grow our organization. So I'm hoping that people can kind of share. And Rochelle, if you can put up the poll, you can either we can either do the poll or put it in the chat of kind of why did you want to think about strategic planning? What are you trying to do? Does everybody see the poll?
Yep.
Okay.
It popped up. Do we have the results yet, Rochelle?
We're at 18 people that filled it out. Or anyone else wants to.
Okay, you can show the results, Rochelle. That's okay.
Done. Waiting on a couple more.
Okay.
We're at 20.
And so while we're thinking about the poll, and what our big question is so when we're thinking about this question, as Stefanie mentioned earlier, we want to consider who are the best people to address it. Oh my gosh, you guys are across the board.
Amazing. Okay.
And so this was really to demonstrate that this strategic visioning roadmap process can do something like improve impact, grow organization, help you figure out how to respond to how the kind of like world is changing around you and how you might carry out your mission. The internal challenges might require more of a strategic plan, or even more so a business plan. So if it's about, oh, that's fine. Yes, we all have trouble. Our big question may be like 10 big questions. But it's really thinking about, if the issue is we can't raise enough money, if the issue is we don't have enough staff, if the issue is our internal infrastructure is crumbling and we need to invest in it, all of those things can be solved through this process, but they would not be the big question that we're trying to answer. So if we can only think about those things and kind of like can't see beyond that to move the organization forward or what it might be capable of, then it actually will probably be very hard to address those internal challenges. And so when we are talking about who needs to be in the room, there's some that are required. Establishing the vision for the organization and the strategic direction is the board's job. And so this does need to kind of be a partnership between the board chair and the executive director, that together they are wanting to see the organization shift in some way. And then the leadership staff, or staff in general, whoever that may be, are probably the people with the boots on the ground and have their ear on what's going on and have all of the information and are somewhat like subject matter expertise on the organization and who we serve. And then because this is the board's job, the entire board will need to be consulted and considered as part of this process. So it absolutely needs to involve a partnership between the board chair and the executive director, leadership staff, and then also the full board. And then you go to optional. You can decide that there is some sort of planning committee. When we were talking about what perspectives might be lacking in the room, this is where you can bring in key stakeholders. You want to make sure that the perspectives of those you serve or people with lived experience are always a part of this, because again, this is about testing your assumptions and really figuring out how your organization can further its impact. And then also a consultant, not necessary. I have done it both ways. Where there's a benefit is when you're talking about gathering information in an impartial way, facilitating a process and kind of like having a scapegoat or having someone who can kind of like take those emotions and air out of the room, and also having a accountability partner. But it's not necessary. You just need to be very mindful about your approaches. And so what type of information is needed? This is also about prepare. And so this is making sure that everybody who is coming to the table is able to make thoughtful decisions. So there may be a level of education that needs to happen, and information gathering about the organization, about the kind of context of its mission, how it's performed in the past. I feel like as staff members, you can often take that, this information for granted, and then board members oftentimes are completely in the dark. They don't know, or at least they don't understand how it impacts the organization. And then there's the qualitative, which would be, some of you mentioned like emerging needs or trends. Maybe there's new research or information about how you can better carry out your work, new best practices. We live in a forever changing, constantly rapidly changing world now. And so what's changed in your environment that might mean that you need to make a shift to meet where things are at now. And then that anecdotal stakeholder feedback, like what are you hearing? What does the funding community say about your work and what's needed? What do business leaders say? What do community leaders or experts in the field say about what's needed? Let's start to actually gather that feedback about how they're viewing your organization and the difference that it has the potential to make. And then your board and staff. Survey them all, make sure everyone is included and captured in this. Staff shouldn't be left out of it. No board members, again, should be left out of it. And then once you have that information, start having the meetings before the meetings. So building consensus and being able to have productive conversations is kind of the name of this game of coming up with the plan. And so we need to make sure that everybody is capable of doing that. So if you know that someone is particularly a naysayer or is always going to bring up a specific topic, talk with them beforehand, bring them into the fold beforehand. Everything doesn't need to happen in large group meetings. Start to talk to them about what you're thinking or what the findings were, address any concerns right up front. Through this, again, consensus, you can't just ignore people's opinions. And so any questions or concerns need to be followed up on. There are some people who are going to be cheerleaders, inform them first too. Have them in the room and ready to go and ready to have some backup for what is going on. I keep pressing the other button. There we go.
Okay, great. So, just really quickly, I have to say, I want to go back to that last slide. We don't have to go back to it visually, but the meetings before the meeting, I believe, will be the biggest indicator of how successful you are. The more you can prepare before you go. All of us have been in a meeting that has gone sideways. That, in my opinion, is because of the lack of preparation ahead of time to make sure that the agenda was the right agenda, that you had the people in the room that needed to be the ones verbalizing whatever the direction was, that there wasn't enough thought process put into what was going to happen during that meeting or anticipating things. So to me, that is, if you can invest time in one thing that comes out of this process, is make sure that you are really getting that complete buy-in prior to your meetings. Make those phone calls, have the right people involved.
And I'll point out that we had the preparation phase as the longest phase. That's 2 to 3 months. So that is where you're going to spend your time, is gathering feedback, input, having the conversation.
Exactly. So now we are getting into phase 2. This is about a 6 to 8 week process. And what we want to say to you is that, this is the point where you do want to take a look at your mission. That is not something that you want to change regularly. Your mission is your mission. But when you are going through a strategic planning process or a strategic visioning process, it's really important to just, temperature check. How do we feel about our mission? Our vision will change a little bit more along the way, as we say right here, around every 3 to 5 years, because that is something that we want to continuously be almost making obsolete, right? Like we want to achieve what is our impact that we're having? Are we able to actually achieve this? So that's something that we want you to spend a decent amount of time looking at through this. Is, it's kind of like it's part of your big question is our vision the right one for right now? Do you want me to keep going, Christina?
Oh, I can go.
Go ahead.
And so with this, there are some kind of key questions that you want to start to ask yourself to determine what your vision is. And it's more about what we talked about. This current climate is what's most needed from those that we aim to serve, and how might it change over time? Are we going to be able to meet that need? And considering our mission. And so this is, as we mentioned, a very mission-driven plan. So we're not, I can't say this enough, we're not thinking about we need more staff. We're not thinking about we need to fundraise money. We're thinking about what are our organization's strengths, unique positioning. Like maybe we're the only person who does this in this community. Maybe we're the only organization who has this spectrum of programming. Maybe we're the only organization that serves these types of people. And so the strength might be that you're the only in some certain field, or you're the only in an area, or you happen to have some superstar leadership team who is just can bring together everybody, and you're a great convener, whatever it may be. This is the time to really think about that, how it relates to your mission, and how you might leverage those things to carry you into the future.
And by the way, we're going to give you some examples in a second, but just FYI, we are going to be sending out to you afterwards an amazing worksheet, that will help you look at your vision and your mission as well. It is an awesome exercise to go through with your board during a board meeting, maybe in lieu of a board meeting. If you're trying to create a board that's more actively involved and engaged and more of a working board, it is a great exercise to do. If you get the worksheet and you're not 100% sure what to do with it, let us know. We can give you a little bit of guidance.
And so some examples, I'll just go through the first one to kind of point out the difference, is this mission is to promote disability inclusion by empowering educators and engaging students and communities. So this is what they're going to do forever. This is what they do, who they do it for, how they do it. Their strategic vision is to establish a new standard in education where ability diversity is expected and valued in every classroom. So this doesn't say that they're going to be in every classroom. This means that they're gonna raise the bar on what ability diversity and how it's received in schools looks like. And they're going to be the leader in that. And that's very achievable in 5 years with a focused plan and the right resources. So this doesn't say they're going to solve the problem, but it does say that they're going to be in a very different place that people can get excited about. And so once you have that vision and mission, strategic vision and mission settled upon, then you're going to start digging down a little bit deeper. And I always call this like everything is a if then. And you're going to identify your aspirational goals and questions. And so your aspirational goals are, if we do these things, then we will achieve our strategic vision. And so again, it's not if we raise more money, because that does not answer the question of if we're going to become a leader in the inclusive education space. We can't just do that with more money. Other things need to happen. So it's how do we need to change our approach to achieve this future vision? And again, are there any external factors and internal factors that present an opportunity or an obstacle? And so these goals would be how you're going to address those things. And so aspirational goal, big picture areas of change. If these are accomplished, your organization will make significant strides towards achieving your vision. For each, you're going to come up with 3. I think that's ideal. 5 becomes a little bit unruly because you're going to keep digging deeper. But 5, I would think, would be the max. And these are overarching, big picture. So if you're coming up with a lot, you probably won't achieve them anyway. Your organization is too dispersed in its focus. And then the tactics are the very considered action or strategy to achieve the goal. And so here's an example, and I'll just go through the first 2. So this goal is to eliminate barriers to our program by enhancing our current model to accommodate a broader spectrum of teacher and school needs in under-resourced communities. And so the first tactic is that we're going to assess and articulate our program culture, our program structure, our life cycle, our pricing in a way that can better fit with the kind of like our target audience now, which are these under-resourced communities. I want to see if people are kind of understanding the layers. Thumbs up, thumbs down. I wouldn't see it though. Only Rochelle would.
We'll take a little break in a second.
We have some thumbs up.
Good.
And so some good kind of like tools to employ to get to what these things might be your vision, your aspirational goals, and your tactics are do your own SWOT analysis, get a lay of the land, where you fall with other organizations, and actually talk to those kind of competitor model organizations directly. I find that there tends to be more community and resource sharing than not. Anonymous surveys, so people can be incredibly candid in their feedback, one-on-one discussions, focus groups, and again, you will need to have a board and staff retreat at some point.
And I'm actually going to go through a sample facilitation process or a sample process from start to finish and give you some ideas of when in this kind of calendar of strategic visioning roadmap, creation, that where things are taking place. The one thing that I will, that I didn't really say ahead of time is that this is a short document, meaning that like when you put together a typical strategic planning document, I've seen strategic planning documents that are 30 to 50 pages long. This is not that. This is no more than probably 8 to 10 pages long. And I think that one thing that, and it might be 2, literally might just be 2 pages long. So I just want to make it very clear that what you're walking away with is something that you should be using on a regular basis that is not going to give your board anxiety to pick up and actually use. So here's some guidance as to what this process could look like for you. Okay,
we're
so
not reading all the words. We wanted to provide this so that you had it as a tool.
Exactly. I am not going to read through every single thing. So in part 1, this is really where you are information gathering. That's that piece that Christina talked about, where you're doing the SWOT analysis, where you're talking to people, you're figuring out who's sitting on your strategic visioning committee, who's playing what leadership roles. So this is really this period of time. Once you have all that planning in place, you're surveying your staff and your leadership. You want to take a look at the materials that make sense to review. So if you're going to be looking, let's just say that you decide that you're going to dig in heavily on your operations. Maybe you've never had an executive director before. And so you need to figure out what role that executive director is going to play. And your board that has always really kind of played a staff role, they're now not going to be doing that anymore. And so what is that process going to look like? So,
and how is that going to affect your organization's future impact? Because that's really the mission part. Like, we're hiring an executive director to further our mission in some way. What is that? What impact is that going to make?
Exactly. So, we want you to break it down. So when we're talking about these big goals, I want you to think of it, and you can even break them down. When I was working with an organization recently, we had 6 areas of focus. We looked at operations, we looked at membership, we looked at fundraising, at board and leadership governance. We looked at 6 different topics that are similar, that most organizations have to contend with. And so we want to make sure that under each of those, we were identifying those 3 to 5 large goals, and then the tactics underneath each of those. So look at your operations, look at your financials, discuss your programming. Do you have too much programming going on? Is there a new program that you've been wanting to do for 5 years now, but you've never really had the time or the resources to do? Is this the right time for that? Fundraising. If we want to offer more fundraising, do we have the right amount of funds in order to be able to do that? If so, do we have a development committee? So maybe that's one of our big goals. So
we have vision goals that support fundraising.
Right, exactly. So these are some of the areas that we want you to think about. We want you to review the materials that you have in these areas. And once you've conducted the surveys and the interviews, we want you to have that first board meeting where you share those findings from the survey and the interviews, so that there's transparency about what you are finding. But make sure that you take all the information and you combine it together so that you are not taking people's confidentiality for granted. We don't want anybody to feel called out in this process. Okay.
And this first board meeting is really about kind of getting everybody on the same page and identifying areas of need, like education gaps. So our board happens to not know anything about this, and they're the people who are supposed to set our strategic direction. What do we need to do to address that?
Exactly. And we're going to be giving you some interview and survey question examples that you need to ask, as well as a part of your freebies that we're going to be sending out. So stay tuned for that also. Then we want to, after our board meeting where, there's been response to the survey findings and everybody has had an opportunity to voice their opinion. And by the way, normally during that meeting, you're not going to get a lot of pushback because these are the opinions that you can't challenge the opinions that are coming from the group. You're laying them out there and you're letting them know how all of your stakeholders feel. So this shouldn't be a meeting that is a hard meeting. The meetings that will become a little more challenging will come later when you have to kind of tackle some of the issues that may have come up. But during that first board meeting, when you're actually sharing the data, that is more, well, these were people's opinions. We're just reporting that out to you so you can hear what it is. Now we're taking all that information and we're beginning to set our board retreat agenda. And we're just going to be designing that board retreat in order to capture the information that we need to pull in, which is taking a look at operations, deciding what are our potential big, large goals that are going to be falling under that. And you can do this in any number of ways. You can break people into small groups. You can do this as a large group. You can whiteboard together. There's many, many ways to actually conduct this process. And we can also give you some ideas about what makes sense based on the organization that you have and the size of your board. It's really going to depend from organization to organization.
And when we talk about having the meetings before the meetings, and we're mentioning meetings right now, there will be meetings in between these meetings to address any concerns and the problem people.
Right, exactly.
What the best approach is. And that would happen with your core planning group or with the executive director and board chair, but everyone will be prepped.
Exactly. The next, and there's also lots of communications and setting the stage and the rules and expectations to your board members as well before they walk in the door. Okay, then we're going to have this 4 to 5 hour board retreat. Make sure that you take a day with each other, do some fun team building, getting to know you exercises. Those types of things will help you as you get more into the meat of what you're doing to create some of those important relationships and trust between your board members. So just make sure that it's going to be an engaging process and you start off with some sort of activity that creates that culture for the day.
And what you should expect to walk away from this board retreat from is a draft of your strategic vision or a thought of where you're headed, as well as kind of loose kind of goals and maybe tactics, like you're starting to group things. So never in a meeting are you wordsmithing or finalizing anything. That is going to come from the core planning group or from specific people.
Exactly. And we're also going to send you a document that will lay out how to structure your action items and your tactics and how all these things can really work together. So stay tuned for that
And
also.
so, as we said, the meat of it is not going to happen. We're gathering ideas, we're finding trends, we're kind of building buy-in. And then in the next board meeting is when that planning group would present results. And I would very much advocate for that, as much as this can come from peers, so board members, that it does. So even if a lot of the work is happening at the staff level, that some board members are prepared enough to present this and back it up. And again, the meeting will not be wordsmithing. It will be gathering input. This is always iterative. And so it's kind of helpful in that way. And
Exactly.
also in that meeting, you want to begin to discuss next steps. So who's owning what? And this happens in a lot of ways. It can be at the committee level. In the document that we provided that shows, kind of lays out what this strategic roadmap process, or yes, strategic vision roadmap looks like. Sorry, I'm reading the words. Instead of saying like who owns it, it's who owns the next step. I feel like we mentioned this earlier. I like to think about it like who owns the next 90 days or who owns the next 30 days, or determine a shorter period of time, figure out what's needed to move something forward, and give like a committee or a group or individual ownership of it, or create a specific task force. It doesn't have to necessarily just be a board committee, because I know that functioning board committees can be so hard, though this is a good way to help them function and give them work to do. And so as soon as you have that document, you're going to start getting feedback on it. And it's going to be a very draft process. And this is kind of where we leave the strategic plan at home. It's like, we're ready to go. We want to start bringing more voices into the circle. We want to start kind of testing the assumptions of our assumptions, building buy-in for the plan. And I have had at this period of time, I've had it be where this determined our priorities. Yes, some board members will take ownership of parts that they're interested in. So that's where I say, let's give ownership for 90 days. Maybe a board member needs to make a key connection, or maybe they're gonna connect staff to a group that is going to potentially fund it. Maybe they're going to make introductions. This is a board and staff partnership. And so, but here is where you start to see there is a real appetite for these goals and maybe not others, or people have a lot of questions about our ability to do this and not this. And you will be able to then go back, back to the board, back to the staff, and begin to take action on the work. Like, we've gotten some feedback and we're going to move forward in these areas. We don't need to know how much it costs. We're going to continue to revisit who takes ownership of certain areas. And through this process, which will be ongoing, we're going to iterate, we're going to get feedback, we're going to take action in some areas. You'll begin to, I've had within a 4-month period, do this and receive $1 million gift for a key point and in this, for carrying forward a key goal that we thought would be hard to fund. So we wouldn't have prioritized it, but it's through having the conversations that we were able to kind of fund it and kick it off. So you want this to be a quick process, very high level, and in draft form, so people can be insiders and begin to help you shape what your next steps are, how you'll fund them, how you'll staff them, and all of that. And so we'll leave, I'm trying to figure out what slides are last so I know how fast I should go. And so this should really also be a funnel for, I would say, work across the board. So committees will own part of it. I think it should be revisited at every board meeting, and probably one key goal or one tactic should be like the meat of a discussion. And staff and the board chair and the planning committee can help set that. For program planning, I would act as if this is what you're doing and begin to funnel what you're doing through the goal of this vision lens. And if something doesn't fit, see if you can stop doing it. Do less of it. How are people spending their time? So it doesn't all have to be kind of money related. For fundraising, I just gave a fundraising example, but you'll begin to use this as a fundraising tool. You essentially just outlined your key areas for a major gift campaign. And so if you can put some broad overarching dollar goals to that, they again can be loose because this is iterative and you're bringing people into the process early and they like that. You can just begin to have the conversations that would lead to the funding that's needed to carry it out. Communications, I would start to develop key messaging around your future vision. You don't need to know everything about it to start to figure out how your organization would like to talk about how they see themselves in the future and permeate that throughout all of your donor and external communications. And then you have this core planning group, which I think people might come in and out of as needed, but the board chair and director, I think the development director should always be there. They should do everything. Anyway. Yes, the core planning group would be the owner. I feel like when it's volunteer leadership, you have to kind of meet them where they're at and understand that at some points they might provide more value than not, and to make them stay the course if maybe they don't want to. So I think for volunteer leadership, again, board chair and executive director have to be a part of that group. I advocate for the development director. And then volunteer leadership, ideally they will stay and see it through, but at times it might make sense for kind of some shifting of who's in that group. That's my personal opinion.
Here are it's 11:01, so I know we need to get everybody off. But here are the documents that are going to be emailed you post webinar. I also got a request for some sort of exercise at the beginning of a board retreat. So we will send out an exercise called Knowing Your Organization as well. So you have something to do with your group at the beginning of your strategic planning retreat. If we could just do really quickly a one-word wrap around, if you could all just in the chat, just write how you're feeling right now. We just threw so much information at you in a very short period of time. But if you could just really quickly in the chat, write, feeling excited, nervous, overwhelmed, whatever you're feeling after this session, that would be amazing. We are here for you. If you have any questions, please contact me at Stefanie at EmpoweredNonprofits.com. You can also always call or text me if you want to get in touch with us. But stay tuned for lots of information coming your way and the next day. And look out for our next Empowered Hours. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see what we've got in the chat here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Feeling hopeful about the process, inspired. What you laid out makes a lot of sense. Overwhelmed.